Ethan Miller, 21 years old, stood on the balcony of his small apartment in Boston's South End. He looked down at the red brick streets and the rushing young people, all carrying a hurried, ambitious energy Ethan craved, but felt profoundly disconnected from. He was a third-year economics major at a prestigious university, a path he had chosen because it represented power, money, influence, and respect. But his heart felt perpetually heavy. The power Ethan believed in was embodied by Mark, his roommate who consistently earned A's and already had a Wall Street internship lined up, or Sarah, the girl who owned a small clothing brand on Instagram by the time she was 20. They were the loud, the brilliant. And Ethan, he was just a pedestrian in a city, too big, a man perpetually trying and failing to imitate Mark and Sarah. He was convinced that true strength lay in aggressive competition and uncompromising assertiveness. He exercised frantically, read finance books late into the night, and tried to speak powerfully and decisively during presentations. But his efforts ended in miserable failure. During the most crucial final presentation on investment strategy, Ethan's voice trembled. He got tangled in complex terminology he didn't truly grasp, and ultimately, he made a basic calculation error. Professor Anderson, who believed in the power of preparation, looked at him with disappointment. That night, Ethan wandered away from the noisy dormitory. He walked aimlessly until the cold Boston drizzle seeped through his thin jacket. He stopped in front of a small, dark storefront. Its warm, amber light spilling from an old door. The silent reader. The shop owner was an old man named Elias, with a long white beard and knowing eyes that seemed to read thought. "Young man," Elias said, without lifting his head from an antique leather-bound book, "does this rain make you feel smaller?" Ethan shrugged, his voice hoarse. "No, I just feel defeated. I try to be strong. I try to do what I'm supposed to do, but I can't. Maybe I wasn't born for that kind of power." Elias set the book down, the sound a soft punctuation mark in the silence of thousands of pages. "What power, Ethan?" "The power of noise, the power of winning over others. You are seeking a power that others have defined for you." Ethan remained silent. Elias gestured toward a secluded, dusty shelf filled with forgotten novels and old history books about overlooked figures. "Do you see these people?" Elias asked. "They didn't build empires. They didn't own banks. Their power wasn't in what they did, but in what they were. You know, you've always had wonderful ears." Ethan frowned. "Ears? I don't understand." "When you were a child, you came here with your parents. You never demanded toys or ran around. You just sat in a corner. And when you talked to me, you always listened, truly listened. You remembered everything about the stories I told. That is the power of understanding, of connection. It doesn't scream, but it anchors everything." Elias handed Ethan a small, worn notebook with a navy blue cover. "You always said you wanted to change the world. The power of assertiveness can only change numbers. The power of empathy will change people." Ethan took the notebook home. For the next few days, he didn't touch his economics textbooks. He started using the notebook to take notes. He didn't record financial terms. He recorded what he saw. The tired expression of the morning barista. His friend's anxious story about a student loan. The joyful look in a mother's eyes picking up her child from school. He realized that when he stopped trying to stand out, he started to see. His power was not a sword, but a mirror. About a week later, the economics department held a community workshop to connect students with struggling local businesses. Ethan was assigned to prepare an introduction for a small, closing bakery called the Daily Crumb, a place of significant cultural importance to the neighborhood. Initially, Ethan planned to use dry charts and market analyses. But then he remembered Elias's words. He discarded the economic slides. Instead, he went to the bakery, not to analyze its finances, but to listen. He spoke with the elderly baker who had baked bread there for 40 years. He recorded the stories of how the bakery had been a first date spot for many couples, a refuge after a bad day, a keeper of memories' flavor. At the workshop, Ethan didn't talk about profits. He told a story. "I am not here to talk about EBITDA," he began in a soft, yet steady voice. "I am here to talk about a place. A place that smells of childhood. A place where the cookie caused Ms. Smith to decide to propose in 1985. The strength of a community is not in its wealth, but in its invisible threads of connection. The Daily Crumb is one such thread." He read aloud the stories he had documented. The story of a homeless person always offered a free, warm cup of coffee. The story of a little girl who always came just to hear the door chime ring. The presentation ended not with thunderous applause, but with an emotional silence. A few investors weren't looking at the screen. They were looking at Ethan, and more importantly, they were looking at the story. By the end of the session, 2 local investors approached Ethan, not because of his financial analysis, but because of his vision. They didn't just want to save a business. They wanted to invest in a community value. Ethan didn't become Mark. He didn't get the Wall Street contract. He switched his major to sociology and urban development, combining his analytical skills with his deep empathy. He had found his true strength. It was not the sound of a triumphant roar, but the sound of sincerity, echoing in the quiet, reaching the deepest place in the hearts of others. He realized, just like Boston, that greatness lies not only in the skyscrapers, but also in the old street corners where silent stories are told.